Hi there. Today I will be doing my prospective TBR for roughly the rest of the year. Now, this is in a very specific category, and it is for the translation category, reading around the world. A lot of booktubers are really into reading around the world challenges, and they aim to read a single translated piece from every single country that exists. That's not really my goal because I want to read what I want to read, and I don't want to read a book from a country just for the sake of saying I read a book from X country. But I do feel that I want to up my translation reading game because I think here in the US, a lot of the works that we get that are translated tend to be primarily from Western Europe. Maybe you'll get like some Russian literature, Russian classics. You might get some stuff from Scandinavia, but overall it's mainly like France, Germany, Italy, Spain, etc., etc. And I want to focus on slightly more obscure countries. So I have a list of 10 books that are from countries I have not yet read from, except for one. And yeah, I am going to go over them. And so if you're interested, stick around and we'll get started. The first book on my list is actually, it was long listed for the 2026 Booker, and that is Women Without Men, a novel of modern Iran by Shahrnush Parsipur. The title is about, I think it's a play on Hemingway's Men Without Women, and it was published originally in Iran in, I believe, the early 80s, and then it was pulled shortly after. It was banned. The author was actually imprisoned for this work. I think she's been imprisoned numerous times in Iran, even prior to the current government under the Shah. So I definitely want to read this. I'm not quite sure what it is about. I think it is about, it deals a lot with like women's sexuality. I think it's post 1953 coup in Iran, and it is about women escape the narrow confines of family and society only to face daunting new challenges. So the role of women and women's internal lives. Sounds a little bit dreamlike. Like I said, it was controversial when it was published, so I am looking forward to reading it. The next book on my list was shortlisted for the Booker and also deals with Iran. However, it was originally published in Germany, and that is The Nights Are Quiet in Tehran. The author is Shida Bazyar. This follows a family throughout it's like one of those multi-generational family sagas. It starts in 1979 during the revolution, and it follows a young communist revolutionary who fights to overthrow the Shah, and then the family leaves Iran when the new government comes into power. They move to West Germany, and it goes through the generations. I think it ends in 2009 when there's protests that rock Iran after Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's re-election. So I am looking forward also to reading this. Again, this has a really long wait list at my library. I guess everyone wants to read about Iran too. So the next book, again, this is the last Booker book I will mention. It was shortlisted, and that is She Who Remains by, I am not going to be able to say this name, Pehe Kapak, I don't know. I'm just going to put it up here. This is a Bulgarian novel and originally written in Bulgarian. However, it's about, it takes place in Albania, and it is about Albania's sworn virgins who do declare like a life of celibacy with men, and they live in the mountains, and they are rather like kind of transmasculine in a sense. I have heard about this like over a decade ago, this phenomenon, so I'm very curious to read it actually, especially because I haven't read anything from that part of the world in Southeast Europe. Speaking of that region, a country I've actually been to, for Croatia, I would like to read Underground Barbie by Maša Kolanović. This is I love the cover, by the way. Actually, this is what caught my eye. Now, this is about the Yugoslav War, the disintegration of Yugoslavia, and as that's happening, I think, like, the main character is a child, and she's playing with her Barbies, and there's a lot of, like, symbolism involved. I don't know the details, but I would like to check this out. When I went to Croatia, I did learn about the disintegration of Yugoslavia and who was fighting who, but I could not keep track. It was very confusing to me. Again, another Eastern European country I want to read from is, for Romania, that is I'm an Old Commie by Dan Lungu. I love this title. I feel like this is going to be me as I age. No, unfortunately, this is not in my library, so I'm going to have to buy it, I guess. Apparently, this is about, let's see. I think it takes place like 15 years after the disintegration of the Soviet Union and the Soviet satellite states, and it follows like an older woman who feels very disillusioned with like the capitalist transition. A lot of those countries did not transition well to capitalism, and her daughter lives, I think, in Canada, and she's like, in the upcoming election, please, please, please don't vote for the Communist Party. So I am definitely interested in like the whole time period of like that transition of the 90s and 2000s of those Soviet states, and what life was like, because my understanding was it was not great in a lot of these countries. So that is Romania. The next book now, so we're done with Eastern Europe, is from a country that I have already read, and that is Brazil. That is Gabriela, Clove, and Cinnamon by Jorge Amado. Now, I've read Clarice Lispector a couple years ago, had no idea what was going on in the book, so I want to try something else. This, to my knowledge, is about, I think it takes place in the 1920s, and it does follow a Syrian immigrant restaurant owner, and he hires a young woman named Gabriela, and I guess it's like a love story. I'm not sure, but not really. It's historical. I don't know. It sounded interesting, and Brazil does have the largest, actually, diaspora of Lebanese immigrants in the world, so I am curious to read it. I have it on request from my library right now. Now, we're going to go to Asia, Central Asia, Kyrgyzstan, Jamilia by Chingiz Aitmatov. This is, I believe this was originally published in Russian, in the Russian language, and I don't know if it was published in Soviet Kyrgyzstan or actually in Soviet Russia. I heard about this book actually from Lid Loves. She reviewed and read this because she's doing the Reading Around the World Challenge, and Kyrgyzstan is so obscure. It is from the point of view of a fictional Kyrgyz artist, Said, who tells a story looking back on his childhood. The story recounts the love between his new sister-in-law, Jamilia, and a local crippled young man, Danyar, while Jamilia's husband, Sajik, is away at the front during World War II. And it takes place in Kyrgyzstan as well. The story is backdropped against the collective farming culture, which was early in its peak in that period. I do think Central Asia is an interesting region of the world. I actually want to travel to Uzbekistan for many years. And now for East Asia, I have 3 remaining countries. So one is Taiwan. I guess it's technically not a country, but I know that's controversial. The Age of Goodbyes by Li Zi Shu. This was originally published in Taiwan. I think it was published in 2010. It has 3 different narratives. In the summer of 1969, in the wake of Malaysia's deadliest race riots, a woman secures her place in society by marrying a gangster. In a parallel narrative, a critic known only as the third person explores the work of a writer named Du Lian, who is the same name as this woman who marries a gangster. And then the third storyline is the second person. You are reading a novel titled The Age of Goodbyes. Okay, so this is the second person. This sounds very experimental. It could be a flop or it could be really great. A novel I recently read that had last year I read was The Seven Moons of Maui Almeida that had the U POV in it. So I'm always up for something that's experimental. I would like to check it out. That will be for Taiwan. Now, speaking of mainland China, we will do Love in a Fallen City, Eileen Chang. Apparently, I was looking up stuff for China because I realized I've read a decent amount of books by Chinese American authors, but not by people. I don't know if I've read anything by someone from China directly, published in China. So Eileen Chang was one of the greatest, it says, writers of 20th century China. She enjoys a passionate following both on the mainland and in Taiwan. And this is Love in a Fallen City. This is, I believe, a collection of short stories. It says, keenly alert to sexual politics and psychological ambiguity with intense lyricism that echoes the classics of Chinese literature. And she was only in her 20s when she wrote and published this collection. And now for the last book I will be doing is for Vietnam, and that is Dumb Luck by Vu Trong Phung. This, when I was looking up for Vietnam, there's a couple things that came up. There was one that was, I don't remember the name, it was from the perspective of a North Vietnamese soldier, and I was like, I can't read any more like war stuff right now. But this one takes place in like colonial Vietnam during the early 20th century. This was banned actually in Vietnam for a period of time. It says banned until 1986. It was a bitter satire of the rage for modernization in Vietnam during the late colonial era. It follows the absurd and unexpected rise within colonial society of a street-smart vagabond named Red-Haired Duan. I'm not saying that right. Says the transformation of traditional Vietnamese class and gender relations triggered by the growth of colonial capitalism represents a major theme of the novel. So anything that is about the colonial era, satire, controversial, I'm all for that. Again, the only thing Vietnamese I have read was from Vietnamese Americans. So yeah, and that's it. Those are the 10 books I plan to read by the end of the year, hopefully, to add to my Reading Around the World challenge. Let me know in the comments below if there are any books that you have read from countries that you think are obscure, particularly countries that are not Europe, unless it's like Eastern Europe. Because I read a lot of stuff from Arab writers. I've read from almost every Arab, not quite, but a decent amount from like the Arab world. But I would like to focus a little more on things from Asia, Central Asia, the former Soviet bloc aligned states, and yeah, also Africa. I have not read, other than North Africa, I have not really read much from Africa, to be honest with you. So any suggestions, please drop them in the comments below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.